Hello, and welcome to the People's Platform. I will be your host for this episode. My name is Rachel Meiselman. Now, normally you see me hosting my show, Bostonian Rap, but today, special treat, hosting the People's Platform, and I have a great guest, a very special guest. His name is Kenneth Nassif, and he is a retired Massachusetts state judge. Today's show, we're going to be talking about what everyone's talking about, and that is the 2016 presidential election. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It really, truly is an honor. May I call you Ken?
Sure.
Okay. Ken, you are a native Bostonian.
I am.
You went to Boston Latin School.
I did.
You're an alumnus. You subsequently went to Northeastern University. Then you followed in the footsteps of your mother, I believe, by going to Suffolk University Law School.
I did.
Now, what has struck me with your story is that there has been a whole lot of hard work, and throughout it all, I think you've remained quite humble.
Oh, thank you.
Would you describe yourself then maybe as just kind of an everyday man, the average Joe, who just worked hard and kind of went for his goals, went for his proverbial dreams?
I think that's a fair statement. If I were to describe myself, I probably would say something along those lines. I've been living in the city of Boston my whole life. I never had the opportunity to go to private schools because my parents really couldn't afford it, given the fact that I have a number of siblings. And I worked hard. I worked while I was in college. I worked while I was in law school, took out loans like everybody else, and I paid them. I remember being married when my children were young, and I was still paying my law school bills. And I'm glad it happened that way, and I take pride in what I did. Yeah.
And you had an opportunity to do really a great amount of good. You started out your career, I believe, with the U.S. Veterans Administration, and then you went on and became an assistant U.S. attorney.
That is correct.
And that was, I believe, from 1974 to 1983. And
Yes.
From there, you accepted an appointment to a Massachusetts judgeship.
I did.
And then you worked in juvenile courts and the district courts. And at one point, there was a statement that you made. You actually commented on a book that the former First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton, had released. And of course, now she is the Democratic nominee for President of the United States of America. But It Takes a Village to Raise a Child.
Yes.
And so I thought that your response to kind of the philosophy behind that book was very interesting. And I think that, and of course I'll have you comment on this, but I think that it kind of informs us a little bit of why you support Donald Trump, because you actually do.
I do.
Because this is your background that I'm giving viewers, but you are one of the state deputy state directors for the Donald Trump for presidential campaign here in Massachusetts. But let's get back to the quote. You actually said that you don't agree with the idea behind Secretary Clinton's book, and you said that you believe that what we need is two parents, and that they have to have a commitment to each other and a commitment to the child.
Right. I did say that. It came about because at the time I was engaged in a rather noteworthy case having to do with the so-called Attleboro cult case. I was sitting in Attleboro court at the time, and I happened to have this case before me that involved the death of several children by this strange cult that would not feed their children or practice any safe medicine. And two of the children had died, and I ended up jailing, believe it or not, a a woman who was pregnant with a third child, and I did it for the welfare of the unborn child. It had never been done in the Commonwealth of Mass before, and it was a decision I made that was reported throughout the country, actually. But in any event, in the course of all of this happening, I was interviewed by much of the media, including the local newspaper in Attleboro, Massachusetts, and for whatever reason, the discussion of children and families and their welfare came up, and I was asked about, protection of children and, the best way to raise them. And I guess I came out with a comment. I'm not sure why I did, but I felt that way at the time, that Hillary Clinton's recent book and statements were entirely wrong. It does not take a village to raise a child. It takes a mother and a father who have two commitments. First commitment is to each other, and the second commitment is to their children. And I still feel that way today.
And I just said to viewers that I think that helps inform some of why you support Donald Trump, because again, you are one of the deputy state directors of the Donald J. Trump presidential campaign right here in Massachusetts. And, I think that a lot of people might not look at Donald Trump as someone who's traditional, but if you look at his children, I think that you have to really kind of, whether you like him or not, you have to sit down and kind of think, well, obviously he has some values that could be described along traditional lines. They're all very well spoken, well educated. They have all worked very hard to earn the degrees that they have. You don't see, or you haven't heard, and certainly with the way the media is raking over every aspect of Donald Trump's life, if there had been any kind of diva behavior, do you know who I am behavior on the part of any of his children, that certainly would have been reported on. But everyone really seems to say that they're just hardworking, polite, respectful children.
That's true. As they say, the apple does not fall far from the tree. I had the unique opportunity to be with Donald Trump when he was in Massachusetts on one of his visits. And actually, I had this discussion with him along these lines, and I commented to him about his children and how much people respected them. And I remember what he said to me. He said to me, at an early age, I told each one of them, there are 3 things you must never do: cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs. He was very strong about that. And obviously it would appear that they have obeyed those 3 commandments along with working hard with him to help develop the Trump company. And I think their character in general speaks well of how he brought them up, and I agree with your comments entirely.
And I have to say, it is particularly remarkable because I do feel like we're living in an age of entitlement. And I would think that, if you do have the fortune of being born into a family of means, that not necessarily, of course, but it is easy to kind of, just think, well, I don't really have to work for it. It's going to be given to me. Everything is going to be taken care of for me. But really, again, you're talking about his children who are all very hardworking, and although they're all quite young, Barron, I'm sure, will follow in the footsteps of his siblings. But the others, I just find that they're all quite accomplished and at quite a young age.
Well, they are, and that's, as you know, they sometimes refer to Donald Trump as the first blue-collar billionaire. And I think that's because he has a touch with the average person. He may be wealthy, but by the same token, he speaks to and connects with the average guy in the street, the average working person. And when he brought his children up, as he explained to me, he made sure that they understood what work was and how to do things and how to build things. And he actually had them laying bricks, working with cement, getting to talk with and know the folks who do the construction work from the ground level on up. So I think he gave them a well-rounded experience. And as you say, too often, you know, children of extremely wealthy people get spoiled, get lazy, and get in trouble. And I saw it myself in the years that I sat on the bench.
Of course, you know, we know that it's not necessarily the case, but it can happen. It can
does.
certainly happen.
It certainly does. You know, I've seen it myself. I've seen children of wealthy parents, adult children, get into terrible things, criminal activity, particularly drugs, over the years that I sat as a judge. And it, you know, it amazed me that they had so much opportunity to do so many great things, and they just blew it all. And I attributed some of it, or much of it, to the fact that they were wealthy, and they felt they were entitled, and they didn't feel they had to do what other people had to do. And so it can work against you, being wealthy and born with a silver spoon, so to speak, in your mouth.
Yeah, double-edged
Yeah.
sword. Now, I want to draw out something that you mentioned, Donald Trump having the common touch, a blue-collar billionaire. I like that because, you know, he's actually proof of what we're saying. Just because you are wealthy doesn't mean that you're going to have offspring who are spoiled. And what's interesting beyond that to me is that, you know, because I will say, and, you know, full disclosure, I am also a Trump supporter. Now, that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says, and that, you know, anyone who has any kind of criticism of him, I'm going to attack him. No, because, you know, people have a right to their opinions. And I think in listening to other people's opinions, that actually helped form my own. And that's, I think, why my support of Trump is solid. But, you know, we'll kind of, you know, as this interview goes on, try to be, you know, inject some objectivity into this. But I do think that it's important that to underline, as I said, that he does have a common touch, and that he does speak to people that, quite honestly, I believe a lot of politicians